So I just wanted to quickly go over some of the skills for Pathfinder 2e to explain them a bit better, and some battle mechanics, as well as things you can do outside of combat. First, I'll explain the critical success, failure, and critical failures. Basically, any check that you make for a skill check, there's a set DC. If you pass this, you obviously have succeeded. If you roll lower than that number, it's a failure. However, if you roll a critical success, which is 10 more than the original DC, or vice versa, 10 less, as a critical success or a critical failure, meaning there are more benefits or more detriments. Starting out with acrobatics, which you can use to tumble through enemies while trying to move through spaces. It can also be used to balance on narrow passageways or difficult terrain. If you're trained in acrobatics, you can also use this if you have a flying speed to maneuver in flight and to squeeze into tight spaces. I've grouped these together: Arcana, Occultism, Nature, and Religion, which you can use to decipher writing, identify magic, or learn spells. In the case of arcane casters, you can also, if you're trained, use arcane to prepare spells from somebody else's spellbook. Then we have athletics, which has a lot of options for combat. You have grapple as a combat action, which a critical success means they are restrained, giving the target the flat-footed, immobilized condition, as well as they can't attack. The only thing that they can do is attempt to escape the grapple that you've put them in. Or, on a normal success, they're grabbed, which means they're flat-footed and immobilized. They can still use the manipulate action and attempt attacks while grappled, but they cannot move. You can also use athletics to shove. On a success or a critical success, you move them 5 or 10 feet. You can also step with them as long as you're moving the same direction. You can also use this to trip, giving them the flat-footed condition. And on a critical success, they can also take falling damage. If you are trained in athletics, you can also attempt to disarm an opponent. And disarming, if you succeed, simply loosens their grip. If you were to try to make another disarm check, they take a -2 penalty, but they also take on their turn, they also take a -2 penalty to their attack rolls, as they do not have a firm grip. On a critical success, they are completely disarmed, and whatever it is that they're holding drops in the space that they're in. All the critical failures for the athletics result in you yourself becoming flat-footed. Then move on to crafting, which you can use to recall knowledge or repair. If you're trained in it, you can use it to earn an income, craft, or identify alchemical concoctions. We have deception, which you can create a diversion, which any creature that falls for the diversion, you become hidden to them, meaning they're flat-footed against you. You can also use the diversion to try to sneak away instead, but the creature is flat-footed until it observes you. You can also use deception to impersonate or lie, good for role-playing elements, and you can also use it to feint. So you feint an attack. If the creature falls for your ruse, your next attack against it, they are flat-footed against. Or if you critically succeed, they're flat-footed until the end of your next turn. Meaning, say you start the round, you critically succeed on a deception roll for one action. Your second action you use to attack, they're flat-footed. And the third you also use to attack, they're still flat-footed. It goes through a full round of combat, and then back to your turn. They are still flat-footed against you for your 3 actions. We have diplomacy. Use that to gather info, make an impression on somebody, or make a request of somebody. However the NPC feels about you changes on how they will react, and even a critical success on a request that is just outright ridiculous, an NPC will still decline. It all has to be within reason. Then we have intimidation, which you can use to coerce or demoralize. So to coerce, it's more of a role-playing mechanic, which you can use to essentially bully somebody into doing something for you. But typically, your relationship with that character will deteriorate afterwards, and it's very possible that they could start working against you after you've terrified them, or just simply go to the authorities. You have demoralized, which in combat you can use to intimidate a creature that can hear you, shout at it, cunning slur, whatever insult you want to hurl at them. A critical success results in them gaining the Frightened 2 condition, and a normal success, is just a Frightened 1 condition. Frightened, whatever value is next to the Frightened condition, so 1 or 2, they take that penalty to every check. So attack rolls, skill rolls, as well as DCs, their fortitude, reflex, and will saves. Also, if they're, say, a caster, the DCs to pass those checks are also reduced by 2, or 1, whichever the value is. We have lore, which is straightforward. You can use it to recall knowledge or earn an income. Medicine. So you can administer first aid, in the middle of combat to stabilize or stop bleeding. So if a creature is dying, you can attempt to stop it from further dying out. If you succeed, they are stable back at 0 HP. They're still unconscious. If you use it to try and stop somebody's bleeding from a persistent bleed effect, they can make, typically it's a fortitude check. They can attempt a new fortitude check to try and overcome the bleeding. However, a critical failure, if you're trying to stabilize somebody, it increases their dying value by 1. And if you're trying to stop the bleeding, they take damage equal to their persistent bleed damages. If you're trained in medicine, you have treat disease or poison, which you spend time treating somebody who is diseased or poisoned. It gives them bonuses to their next check when they try to pass to save against the poison or disease effect. Being +4, +2, or on a failure, nothing happens. On a critical failure, however, their next check becomes a -2. You can also use medicine to treat wounds, wherein you take 10 minutes to treat somebody's wounds, and they can only benefit from this once per hour. If you succeed the check, you can instead treat those wounds for an hour. You double the healing. On a critical success is 48. On a success, it's 2d8. And on a critical failure, you deal 1d8 worth of damage instead of healing. The DC for this check is set at 15. So if you make a DC 15 medicine check, you can possibly heal for 2d8 or 48 for every hour. But you also have to have the time to do that. Further trained in medicine, so if you're an expert, a master, or a legend, you can increase the DC to also increase the healing for it. So at an expert, the DC becomes 20, but they gain an extra 10 HP. At master, it's 30 and 30. At legendary, it's 50 HP and a DC of 40. And we have nature. You can use it to command an animal. So if you have a trained animal or an animal that's friendly towards you, you can essentially make a request of it, and it follows the same rules as making a request of an NPC. A creature is more likely to help you if it's friendly towards you or feeding it. Then you have performance, which is basically just used as making an income, possibly creating a distraction, depending on the context. Society can use to recall knowledge about the local area. You can use it to subsist, and if you're trained in society, you can also decipher writing, and you can create forgeries. So you're trying to forge a letter. Stealth. The stealth actions, you have hide an object, hide, and sneak. So if you're trying to, like, say you're in the middle of combat and you're trying to hide, so you jump behind some boxes or some crates. The creature saw you move behind those objects, so they know you're there, but they can't see you. However, after you've become hidden, you can sneak afterwards, moving around, and if they still don't notice you, they lose track of where you are. You become unnoticed, hidden, so the target is flat-footed against you until you make yourself known again. Survival for exploration, use it to subsist, sense direction. If you're trained, you can also cover your tracks, or try and, if you're using it to track somebody down, like find footprints. Thievery, very straightforward. Use it to palm an object, as long as it's a small enough object. You can use it to steal, pickpocket somebody. And if you're trained, you can use it to disable device, which is usually disabling the mechanical traps, as well as there's pick lock, which follows the same thing. You use it to pick locks. The DC varies depending on what trap, what lock. The last thing that I wanted to bring up for combat's sake is flanking, which flanking, as long as you can draw a line between your square and one of your allies' square, and that bisects one of the enemies that you're trying to attack, they are flanked. Flanking means that the creature being flanked is flat-footed. So positioning is important in combat. Say you not want to move and you want to try and attack 3 times, there are still other things you can do. For instance, say on your 3rd attack, you don't want to attack. You can use an action to raise your shield, which increases your AC. Then there are also other reactions like shield block, which when they're attacked, you can reduce the damage. That should just about cover skill mechanics more in depth.